Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today's guest is Kevin Wilson, professional hitting consultant. For over 19 years, Kevin has been one of the most sought-after hitting consultants in the game. He currently works with, or has worked with, minor league and major league players from all 30 Major League Baseball organizations. And in 2013, Kevin was the hitting coach for USA Baseball 18U national team, and Team USA beat Japan for the gold medal at the IBAF World Cup in Taiwan. So on the show, Kevin and I discuss how hitting is a conversation. He walks through what it sounds like to be in the cage with him, and we spend some time on how we can take 5 minutes a day and make an impact that will last a lifetime. This episode is so good, and here is Kevin Wilson. K-Dub, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, thanks for having me, man. It's just what an honor to be here.
Definitely. Well, I'm honored that you are on here. I know that I spoke with you about a week or two ago, and I told you how big of an influence that KWB radio and you and Joe Ferraro had on my career, especially early on. And I feel like I know you super, super well just because of the content that you guys put out. But for our listeners who want to get to know you a little bit better, do you mind, going through a little bit about your baseball background and why you decided to get into coaching?
Yeah, well, those are very kind words, first of all, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And it's always flattering to hear, especially years later, that, what we did and the people, more importantly, that we had on the podcast, just like you just never know who you touch. So that was very kind of you to share that and bring that up again here. But saying that, my baseball career was a lot like everybody else's, I think, in the game just growing up. Maybe a little bit different at first. I was a hockey player growing up and played baseball a little bit. And by the time I got to high school as a freshman, that's when I really honed in on baseball. So I wasn't an early adopter. I was more of a late adopter to it. And so, and that's where Joe Ferraro, our podcast host, comes into play, where as a freshman, I was on varsity, scared out of my mind. And the short version of that is that he put his arm around me on the bench. And as a junior, we're the same age, but he's 2 years ahead. I'm 2 years behind. So I'll let the audience decipher who's smarter or not with that. But Joe put his arm around me, and he really started to lift me up and guide me. I was a scaredy freshman that was like, what am I doing here? I just want to be with my freshman teammates, on freshman ball in high school. So that's kind of where it kind of started for me in terms of like, maybe I have, after Joe put his arm around me, it's like, maybe I do have a chance at being a good high school player, and really nothing more than that. I always aspired to be an NHL hockey player growing up in Philadelphia. So, and then his wisdom and guidance, we were double play partners for 2 years. And when he left and went to college, I kind of was on my own, but it was cool because his dad was a coach for us, and he really helped me with some fielding stuff and some life stuff and baseball all around. So by the time I was a senior, my senior year of high school was actually the only year I had that was good. And so I didn't sign on to go to college. I went to the University of Cincinnati. I didn't sign until after I graduated high school, which if you tell a parent now that today, they think you're strange and weird. And yeah, that was almost 25 years ago. But the point being is that, for where I was in my journey and what I was doing, I was a late bloomer in a lot of the stuff. I had the talent, which a lot of guys do, right? But I just really didn't put it together to that last year. And thankfully I did. And then I got a chance to play at UC. And then I got a chance to play after UC pro ball for a few years. And how I got into coaching was literally in the off seasons. I was doing lessons to make money, so, I'm making money, not much money in pro ball when you start out. So, and lessons 20 years ago was not a huge thing as it is nowadays. So, looking back 20 years ago, and I kind of look back and think, one, kind of a newer concept of sorts. I was just trying to make some money and pass the time in the off season. Two, looking back, really, what the heck I was doing. I was a switch hitter, middle infielder. I knew what I was doing on both sides and of my swings, and I knew enough to be dangerous to help an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. But certainly I didn't have the Rolodex of stuff I do fast forward 20 years now, and anybody could say that in any profession that they're in, obviously. But
sure.
look back and think that, wow, man, I wish I had some of the numbers of those guys to call them and say, I apologize for whatever it is I was teaching you in terms of maybe not specifically tailoring it to you. I apologize. I just didn't have enough, clubs in my bag, so to speak. Didn't have enough plays in my playbook kind of related to you. So I started out giving lessons, and I did that for over 10 plus years. And, after I got done playing, about 6 years into that 10 years of doing lessons, I had to find out what I wanted to do, right? Like everybody's thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay in baseball? Do I want to coach? And, I have what I used to call rejection letters. I have 30 letters when I used to mail you letters back in the day. I have 30 letters from MLB teams saying, no, thank you for your interest in being a hitting coach, but no thank you. And, I had them as motivation for a number of years as I was still going through kind of what I wanted to do. And I said, at the end of the day, I think I'm good enough. And I was getting more confidence. And I said, I think that I can help professional players. Towards the end of my career, I was helping my teammates. So I knew what that level looked like, felt like, smelled like, however you want to describe it. I knew off the field what challenges are there. I knew on the field what challenges were there. But just because somebody wasn't giving me a shot, I decided, I'm not going to let them dictate kind of what I think I can do. And some of it was naive, and some of it was kind of just that naive courage, or what's the word I'm looking for? Just, you're just kind of like that faith, the leap of faith. So I'm just going to do this. And sometimes we need that. You don't know all of what's ahead of you, but you've got enough conviction in yourself of knowing that you can do it, that you go ahead and do it. And so I got into consulting, what I'm doing now all these years later. And the best part about it, of what I've learned over the years is, man, it's just the relationships, right? Just like you and I are here on in this conversation, and all the people you meet along the way, and the people that pour into you. And, that's why I'm glad I got into it. Not because, you can say you work with a big leaguer or you work with so-and-so, and that has, to me, that doesn't matter. And people closest to me know that that doesn't matter whatsoever. It's the people that matter the most. So, I got into it for the money, and certainly not doing it now for the money. I'm doing it for the purposes to help people on and off the field become more of a hitting mentor than a hitting coach.
Yeah, I've heard you mention the word mentor several different times, and I know that's in your Twitter bio too, which is really, really neat. But tell us a little bit about, when you're working with some of the best guys in the world, what does being a mentor to them look like? I know that we look at, from a professional standpoint, we look at a mentor as someone who guides us, as someone who gives us advice and yada, yada. But specifically speaking for you, I'm sure that's all of the above, but give us a little bit of description and some detail into what that would look like for you.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's just being somebody who's a world-class listener. And you know this too. It's, especially at the highest levels, there's just such a lot of anxiety that goes that, you have people have anxiety in high school or college, or, even the minor leagues too. But, there are so many things that go through a player's mind, went through my mind, went through your mind, went through our listeners' mind when we played. So many things that go through your mind that, it really hinders your performance on the field. So as a mentor, it's, been through it as a player, and, going through it still as a coach. And because you listen, you get to this whole other world opens up to you about what other people are going through, what's on their mind, not necessarily how they're feeling. In terms of asking questions, it's, if I ask you, Jonathan, how you feel, and then I ask you, what's on your mind, that's going to elicit two different responses.
Absolutely.
And it depends on what I'm looking for. But in terms of your question and the topic we're on right now, as a mentor, is I want to know what's on your mind, because what's on your mind is ultimately what they're going to be answers inside what's on your mind in terms of what comes out of your mouth, that most of the time the player answers their own question. I'm just there to be a world-class listener along the way. I want to be that world-class listener, because there's going to be some signposts, some red flags, whatever you want to call it, that come out that certainly I can, they're warning signs for me to latch on to and maybe fall back around with. But I think all of us as human beings, and this is the most important part of it, I feel, is if you're coaching the person, if you're coaching the human being, if you're mentoring, you're leading, you're guiding the person, we all want to be heard, right? We all want to just get stuff off our chest. Somebody just listen to us. And that's a lot of us. And if we have somebody that we trust, that we can share our innermost feelings, anxieties, our whatever pressures or whatever is on our mind, that as a player in this case, gives us the freedom to navigate, knowing that we're not doing it by ourselves. So I just try to walk up alongside them, remind them they're not alone. They know that I'm listening intently to understand where they're coming from. I don't try to teach them. I don't try to discipline them. I don't try to do anything other than meet them where they're at and help them build out from there. And again, most of the time they answer their own questions. They're like, man, thank you so much. And I'm like, yeah, you're welcome. I just sat here and listened. But I think it's really, really important to listen, because there are a lot of people that are looking for people to do just that for them, just to listen.
Okay. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, building trust. And do a lot of players come to you, or does their agent kind of lead them towards you? How does that really work? Because that'll kind of help me construct my next question.
As of now, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
It really is a lot of word of mouth stuff. It could be agents really don't talk to other agents, but like a player will call their agent because their teammate, I work with their teammate, or that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
and now pretty much at the beginning it was a little bit different, right? People are getting to know me and kind of who I am and kind of what I believe in, so to speak, or kind of my way of going about things. And certainly my way is not the best way. I just kind of the way that I do it, and I like to do it, and I feel like produces a lot of good results for that player. We just touched upon briefly about one of the ways, but also the other thing to that too is like I'm not for everybody, mm-hmm. but I am for somebody. And so as more over the years, as more players are out there, and you know how players are, right? They talk and they'll kind of already know, like, all right, this guy, I wish you could work with him, but I don't think you're going to jive with him, or him with you. He's looking for more of this type of guy, which is absolutely fine. I think that's a big part of it. Is you got to find who's the right one for you as a player. So yeah, so it could be an agent thing, it could be a player thing. It's a little bit of both now.
Okay. And so, one of the things that I think that we're tasked with as coaches is trying to build trust with guys. And so there's two sides to that too. I think that if they're reaching out to you, then you've already gotten some street cred, which is going to give them, more of an ability to trust you, I guess. But then you've also got the flip side of that says, hey, my agent was trying to get me to call you, and they may not know you as well, and so that's a whole different intro to the conversation, I guess you would say. And so let's run with that one a little bit. So if a guy doesn't necessarily reach out on his own for you, which is what we get as on-field coaches a lot of the times, and what you did as well, they're kind of in a nice way, they're stuck with us, right? And then with if they're not reaching out to you, then you've got to try and break down those barriers a little bit and break down the walls that are we as baseball players, we've got some ego, and if we don't trust somebody, then we're not going to open up to them. We're men as well, which is one of our downfalls, I guess you could say. We don't have a lot of vulnerability. We don't share that a ton. But how do you go about breaking that down? Because I think that if we all did a better job of trying to gain that trust early on and trying to get to know them better as an individual, sharing some vulnerability and all of that, we would be able to help them rather than, sharing this or that drill. But just kind of walk us through your process of what it's like whenever you are trying to get to know them, especially if they haven't reached out to you first.
This is so good. Man, I love talking about it because it's something I certainly had to learn. But I learned it. It's funny. I guess I'll go back to the beginning. I learned it as a player. As I mentioned, I was a switch hitter, and I think a lot of people can relate to this just in terms of as a player and a coach relationship. So me as a player, the best coaches I had were the ones that didn't try to force me into a way of doing things. And as a switch hitter, a lot of guys tried to get me to do the same thing on both sides. So as a switch hitter, I knew in my heart of hearts, I knew that I was different. I was bipolar in a sense, in the same as a baseball player. I was totally different on the left side than I was the right side. And I knew it, so I knew enough to be dangerous, but I didn't know as much as how to maintain it, maintenance it, maximize it, however you want to talk about it.
Sure.
And the guys that I had that were the ones that came alongside me, asked me a million questions, meaning going back to, hey, how'd you do in high school? How'd you do it in college? How'd you do it last year? To, how do you like to do it? To, hey, what's your family situation? What do you like at home? Brothers, sisters, wife, girlfriend, aunts, uncles, what do you like? Fishing, golfing, all that. And so that gave me a glimpse, even though I was a little bit self-centered, and I think you got to be as a player, you got to kind of got to stay in your lane and sweep your own floor, or else you get run out of town. But when I got into coaching, I was like, man, the guys that really took an interest in me as a person first, and they asked me how I liked to do it, I trusted them more. Instead of the guy that came in, or the coordinator, or whoever said, this is what we're doing, this is an organizational philosophy, and I don't care where you're from or what you do, this is my way or the highway. And certainly back then, there was more of that going on than there is today in some regards, and then today there is still some of the same. Maybe just sounds a little bit different or looks a little different, but it's the same. So for me at the very beginning as a player, I was like, man, I want to be that guy that I really trusted. And then I was tasked with trying to figure out what's, my coaching language, right? Like, how am I going to do that myself with my own personality and my experiences that way? So
sure.
For me, how you gain trust is you really take the time, the intentional time to get to know somebody as a person first and let them know that, listen, man, this is your career, not mine. I haven't played in years and years. It has nothing to do with that, me. I'm just a ball flipper. My job is to get you to know yourself the best. Know thyself, understand why you do what you do. I need you to tell me how you like to do it. If you stay on top of your head and hit line drives, you got to teach me that, because I don't know how that works, but I'm fascinated to learn, because if you do it well, I need to get on your page. And then sharing experiences too. If a guy's from a certain part of the country, or he's a certain level, or he's hitting the 7-line drives in a row and he's frustrated, and I could tell him, like, hey man, I went 0 for 8 with 8-liners, or I went 3 for 51 with 25 strikeouts, and relating to them, because at the end of the day, they don't come to you as a player. They don't come to a coach if they're doing well. I kid people. I said I hang out with miserable people 7 months a year. So the off season is my most fun part, because there's no stats, right? And we have a blast. And I have a blast during the season too, don't get me wrong. And my why is to help people. So I love when I can be that person that they can slide up next to, and after gaining that trust. But they don't come to us as coaches when things are going well. They come to us when things are going bad. And so how you gain that trust for them to actually come to you when things are going bad, it has little to do with the baseball side of things. It has a lot to do at the beginning with getting to know them as a person, opening up to them what you're comfortable opening up with, trying to get some relatable things between you guys, and then work out from there. And then on the baseball side, where the trust comes in, and kind of fast forward to kind of like what you're alluding to nowadays, is like, as coaches, we can't mess people up, and it's our job. And it's some people might have some, feel some pressure with that. I mean, personally, I don't feel pressure with that. I'm confident in what I do. I certainly doesn't mean that I know everything. No, I'm just very confident in what I do, because so many players have taught me so many different ways, because I've been listening. So they're the ones that really taught me. But if I mess up, it's one thing. Like I tell guys, like if you mess up a 10-year-old in a lesson, no one's going to know about it. But if you mess up a millionaire, everybody's going to know it. And somebody in my position will be out of a job in a hurry. So you get to know them as a person. They trust you that it's not about you as a coach. It's about them. You show it in your actions and your words and listening intently to understand. And then your track record of giving good information that fits that player individually for them, that works and it produces results. And that's ultimately where you get the trust on the baseball side, is when you've done it for a while and you don't mess people up. And they'll certainly trust you with their career, especially on the professional side.
No, I love that. And a lot of our listeners are in the amateur setting, and a lot of high school coaches, a lot of college coaches. And so I'm gonna turn the question around on you a little bit and kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, I guess, and say, so Kevin, let's say I'm a high school head coach, and I'm like, man, I really like what you're saying, but I also teach 5 classes. I have them for an hour in the off season every day. And then during the season, we're playing 5 days a week. I just don't know, I don't have unlimited time like you do. So what would your advice for me be if I wanted to do a similar thing to what you're doing, which is having them own the process and then letting them run with it versus, and again, with amateur guys, it's hit or miss on how motivated they are, and even every single day. And so just kind of what's your advice on that? Because I think that that's a route that we could all take and free up some time in the back end if we do it in the front end. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can do that better in the amateur setting.
Yeah, this is something that comes up often. And Joe and I did I can't remember what episode it was on KWB Radio. We did an episode when he was coaching at Bronxville High School in New York. Mm-hmm. And he and I had these conversations, and it revolves around this theme of all it takes is 5 minutes to change someone's life. Okay. And I always preface it that way, and I paint a picture of, think about how many 5 minutes we have in any particular day. 5 minutes we are on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or 5 minutes we're standing in line at Starbucks. Post-COVID, 5 minutes doing anything that we have a lot of 5 minutes. And this goes back to the intentionality behind things. Is if I truly care about my 20 high school guys or 35 college guys, and I do a lot of work with high schools and colleges through the KWB experiences, and I've helped coaches, and I mentor a lot of high school and college coaches as well. And when they implement this idea and they put it in the practice of really taking 5 minutes out of their day, and it could be 1 5 minute out of their day to connect with a player on their team, whether it's walking from the clubhouse to the field, from the bus to the field, from their office to the locker room, text messaging them, maybe sending them a quick email if that's the way that the player communicates, if they're like Joe Ferraro and he loves email. Finding out how they communicate and really taking that 5 minutes and just checking in on them and seeing how they're doing, right? And if you're a teacher, a high school teacher, right, and you're teaching the classes and you have some of your players, for example, in your classes, or you see them in the hall, and as you get to know your players, you see something's off. Right? You find some time within that day or that evening, again, whether it's a text message or you talk to them. And I don't like to do this, and this is something just kind of sidebar, is I always hated when coaches brought me in their office, whether it was a field court, like a farm director or a college coach or a high school coach, because I always felt like I was in trouble. Mm-hmm. So in terms of like really understanding the whole gamut of things, I always love to do meetings outside an office or a setting where maybe the player just feels like he's getting disciplined or something, and all you're trying to do is just check in with them 5 minutes to see how they're doing. They're found, hey man, you looked a little hunched over today, a little slouchy. Like, you okay? What's on your mind? Anything I can do to help? Something simple as that. You may not get anything in return if you got a high school kid, because maybe they just don't want to talk, or you're just starting this relationship. But if you take 5 minutes and you go through your roster, intentionally checking in with guys, a few times a week. Now, it takes work on the front end, I tell guys, but the rewards will be unbelievable on the back end of it. And you got to do a little legwork at first, checking in with them throughout the week, 5 minutes. But at the end of it, man, you do less work at the end because of the fact of it's almost like a flywheel effect. Once you get the flywheel going, I'm not saying it's going to run smooth, but the touches you get on guys, whether it's in the stretch, circle stretch on the field, you're just going around, or during BP, I'll have guys go out and just, go around the field and checking in with guys during BP, pitchers are shagging or just standing out there. Whatever your method, however you think works best for you, the end result, playing the long game here, is you're going to be more connected with your players because you're getting touches on them. It's not going to take a long time. Your 5 minutes might be just a 30-second check-in, but it means the world to them, whether they tell you or not, especially with the younger guys. Sometimes you can't read them what they're taking in, but at the end of the day, they know you care because it's the saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And those 5 minutes checking in with them, you can still get your class schedule ready. You can still get your practice plan ready. You can still spend time with your family. We're not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for 5 minutes. And can you do that with one player? If you do that with one player today, you can do that with 2 tomorrow and 3 the next day, and so on and so forth. So that's my challenge to all coaches, but in particular, guys that have a busy schedule. If it means enough to you to really touch the person that you're with and really pour into them and plant those seeds, because at the end of the day, right, baseball is a great platform to teach life lessons from. What a great platform.
Absolutely.
And I think that if we're intentional about those 5 minutes, the end result for me, and I know for some other people, is when that high school player is 25 and he's getting married, that you get an invitation as a coach because you took the 5 minutes when he was in high school. You took the 5 minutes when he was in college or pro ball, either way. One of the best things is being able to tell my family we're going to another wedding. And because I know that, again, my purpose to what I'm doing is not to get you to become a better hitter. That's the side result of it. I want you to be a better person, a better future husband, and better brother, better father in the future, that kind of stuff. And so if we're intentional about our 5 minutes now, we plant the seeds, we're going to see what it blooms into down the road.
I love that. And again, I love how you're making a better person and you're going to make a better baseball player. And I think that's been said so many times on the podcast that I can't even count it. But whenever I'm interviewing people, obviously I see something in them or someone else sees something in them that makes them good. So when you hear it over and over, you're like, okay, all of these good coaches are saying this thing, then I'm probably going to listen. And that's definitely one of the things that has stood out. And so let's talk about an in-cage conversation, because again, you're a professional hitting consultant, so you are focused on being a mentor and helping them off the field, but also for them to have a job, they've got to produce on the field. And so let's take us through what, say that I am getting help from you and we've had some phone conversations, you've gotten to know me a little bit. And now I'm coming to your facility and we're just going to, go through some different things. Can you give us a peek inside what a session like that would look like?
Sure. It's beauty of it. It's similar for most, but really so different for everybody because it's so individualized. But like you come in the cage and say, I've only seen some game video of you and don't know too much about you. Again, it goes back to the questions, and I want to know all that I can about you. I mean, before you even get in the cage, we're going to have a little consultation before and set out a game plan because we don't have time to waste. I think at any level, right? You don't have time to waste, and certainly you mentioned it earlier. I do have a little bit more time than, say, the college or the high school, but at the end of the day, we all still have the same amount of time to get results quickly. And it's my job to not mess around, and we need to get you ready in the 3-month off season, for example. We need you to make a change if you want to make a change. We need you to get a little bit more an understanding of why you do things better in a short amount of time. So when you walk in the cage, I'm going to pepper you with questions. I'm going to be that world-class listener. I want you to go through your routine. Show me how you do it. Before we even do anything new, show me how you've done it and tell me why you do exactly everything that you do, why you put the ball in the tee the way you do. Why do you do high tee or low tee? Or why do you not even do a tee? Why do you use a short bat? Why do you do this? And so I want to give you ownership of your career because, number one, we talked about before, it is your career. But I want to show that and allow you to feel that, okay, this guy's for real. Like, he's allowing me to do my things. I always say that, the cage is a judge-free zone. I've been there, man. I've fouled a ball off, rolled it over, struck out, been frustrated through the bat. Like, you're allowed to experience it all, and I get it. And so, you're going to be allowed to be yourself, and I'm going to let you go through your whole routine. And at the end of it, because of the answers you gave me and from the questions I asked you, I'm going to know you a little bit more about why you do it. And I'm going to make my own not assumptions, but I'm going to make my own calculations based upon what you say. And I'm going to understand what you understand or what you don't understand or what you know and what you don't know. I'm going to let my eyes tell me what I see. I'm going to merge that and combine that with what you said and what you feel and what you feel is most important for you. And then, like you mentioned before, having a conversation, hitting is a conversation. So, we're going to have that conversation about where we're going to go. Here you are right now. Where do you want to be 3 months from now, Jonathan? Where do you want to be 4 years from now? How do you want to do it? Who do you want to be known for? And what do you want to be known for? So a lot of those things come into play. So therefore, you're telling me exactly where you want to go, but it's my job to have the vision for you and just fill in the blanks. Because as a player, you know enough to be dangerous. As a coach, we have the experience to be able to kind of see where some of those holes need to be filled. And again, we're not judging you for anything that you don't know. And we're going to be able to, again, walk alongside you and just naturally fill in those holes. So at the end of the day, you walk away feeling like it's your swing, it's your approach, it's your career, and that I was just flipping the balls at the end of the day. And because you answered the questions and because you figured things out just through our conversation, you take full ownership of it. And this is, by the way, the worst marketing you could ever do for any business. But I truly believe this, and guys that work with me, they know I really believe this when I tell you, like, I don't want to be your hitting coach. You've heard people say, and I agree all the time, like, as hitting coaches, we're your assistant hitting coach. You as a player, you're the main hitting coach. I don't want to be your hitting coach because I want you to be able to teach yourself through all of it. I certainly will be here for you, of course, and that's when the mentor piece kind of takes over there towards the end, is when you know why you're doing everything as a hitter. Our cage sessions turn into more of kind of just, we're having conversations about life, and I turn into that ball flipper. And yeah, you came in to get your work, but at the end of the day, you got some more answers to your questions and perhaps maybe some of the off the field stuff that's bothering you. But to anybody observing, they think it's just a hitting session, but in reality, it's 10% of it. 90% is the other stuff that we talk about.
No, I really like that a lot. And again, with you especially, and I think with all good coaches, we have no ego in regards to getting credit. I think that, ego is for a lot of people a terrible term, but I think we all have some ego. Otherwise, we wouldn't be taking pride in what we're doing on a daily basis. And I think there's some good ego in that. But whenever we want credit for everything, I think that would be obviously a bad example of what ego, allowing ego to take over for that. And obviously you do a great job with that. And so another thing that I think that a lot of players are dealing with right now, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it. We're living in the data age. And so it can be a really good thing and it can be a really bad thing. It can be super helpful, but it could also be super overwhelming. And so take us through what most players that have come to you, if that conversation has come up, if you don't mind, just kind of take us through what they're saying and how you're helping them with it. Because I see it from the coaching side a lot, but I rarely get the opportunity to hear like an unfiltered version of what the players truly think about, X, Y, and Z with data. But I'd love to hear, what you're getting to hear from them.
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind first is that, and you just brought this up, and it's a great thing to really unpack real quick, is I don't work for a team. I work for the player themselves. So they tell me a lot of the stuff that you, for example, won't hear
right
during the season. And it doesn't mean because they don't like you, some of it really, and a lot of it, I should say, is I don't make out the lineup card. I don't release them or sign them. And so there's that wall that comes down saying like, listen, Kev, I'm drowning in this information. I always say hitters are drowning in information but starving for wisdom. And like, I just can't take it. My organization is, they got so much stuff going on and they're not listening to me, and they want me to meet these points, and they want me to do these drills, and they won't listen to me and all that. And I get a lot of that on my side. Guys that are just frustrated that no one's listening to them, and they're getting force-fed with a lot of information that, quite frankly, for them, may work for somebody else, but for them, they're just totally frustrated, and they feel like their development's going backwards, but they can't really lash out at the hitting coordinator or the R&D department or the GM, depending on what level they're at. So they seek other people who they can kind of get right, and there's no judging, like I said, and there's no lineup cards and being drawn out, and I have no say in the matter other than helping you as the player. So they're coming a lot of times, they're just drowning in that information, or looking for some wisdom. They're trying to find clarity. They're trying to sift through that clutter, and just find something that's simple, repeatable, that makes sense to them in their own language, and that they can navigate with, and they feel comfortable with. And I think a lot of times we got these R&D departments that have a lot of smart people in it. But what's happening is there's a lot of guys that are just poring over the information, in my opinion, and they're not being able to say, hey, do you want this or do you not want this? Does this person learn through this avenue of learning? Does he like video? Does he need video? Does he not? Like, there's some guys I work with that we'll be banning them from the video room because they overthink things, or you give them a little bit more of this. Because at the end of the day, the numbers are just a result of your process and your purposes, and all your preparation. So, really I think it could be really good just to bring back and say, hey, listen, all right. Guys like, well, the organization wants me to have a 30-degree launch angle and this exit velocity, and he's getting beat with fastballs and beating him in the ground, and you just say, hey, just catch the ball out front, and all of a sudden they go back and they're like, yeah, now they like me. But what the organization didn't do is they didn't teach them how to get that number. They just said, go get the number and go get them. Okay. So that's where the clarity comes in, to sift through the clutter, I feel. And I think that you're just trying to, again, help them understand, like, what's the purpose behind all those numbers for them, and do they need to worry about them or not, or do they need to concern themselves with it or not? Because at the end of the day, man, if you're banging the ball around the ballpark and driving guys in and winning ball games, and you're hitting for a good average, which I still think means something in today's game. It can be done, and a lot of guys still do it to this day. That at the end of the day, like, the numbers will all figure itself out. And those guys that they're in the R&D departments, they'll love your numbers. GMs will love your numbers, coordinators maybe, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a productive baseball player because you're doing things that matter for you. And then you're going through the process of things, your approach, your purpose to your everyday routines and your maintenance and in-game stuff. And you look back at the end of the year and your numbers are going to be right where you want them.
Oh, really, really good. And I love that. You're talking about clarity and helping them to understand, what those numbers truly mean. And then, like you mentioned, the how behind, how do we change that, and how do we get to that? Because, again, like you mentioned, there's going to be goals for every player from the organization that helps them to, ideally become better. And it's our fault as coaches if we don't explain the how behind it. So that's really, really good. And I like that a lot. And so let's talk about the in-game process. And obviously, game planning is a huge part in the professional game now, and trying to help players, go up to the plate with clarity and, maybe a clear mind, you could say. And so let's talk about what you're doing to help players prepare from your side for the next day. So let's say that they called you in between starts or whenever. So let's talk a little bit about that, and let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah, game planning is everything, and it's been around for so long. I feel like, back when you used to have the stat packs, you go through, you could still extract stuff out of there where you look at a guy's strikeouts per innings, like a whip, right? Hits per inning, strikeouts per innings. Mm-hmm. You look if he had a lot of wild pitches, probably had a split. Look for opponent's batting average. All that stuff. You could formulate game plans, but even back in the day, just leaning on the rail and watching. Not a lot of guys do that today. I always scratch my head with the modern day players, especially in the big leagues. They go back and after they're at bat and they're looking at their swing. Sit on the rail and watch the rest of the game. Try to pick up tendencies and patterns from the pitcher, release points, glove up, glove down, whatever it is. Guys used to do that way more. Now guys are always in the video room and they wonder why they have a trouble game planning. So today, certainly with technology, there's really cool things with, even with machines and stuff you can do before games with pitch shapes and stuff. And there's certainly a little bit further advanced, but game planning has always been important in the game. Going home and knowing who you're facing the next day. Now, I get it. Not at all levels you're going to be able to do that. High school, even college. But again, we used to watch bullpens. I remember in high school, man, just watch the guy warm up in the bullpen. I go to an amateur game now. Everybody's just so worried about what kind of shoes they're wearing or swag they got. And dude's warming up in the bullpen and he's spiking 22 curveballs in the dirt. And the kids are going up there and I'll say, hey, what pitch did he throw for a strike? I don't know. Well, the dude just warmed up for 15 minutes down there, and you just watch, that you're just hitting fastballs right now because he can't get over the breaking ball. So simple stuff like that you can do even at the amateur level. Just game planning like we always did. So it's a huge piece of it. I don't know if it's really harped upon nowadays because all we do we see swings. We don't hear a ton of people talking about that game plan. Certainly there are really good people that do talk about it, and they do a great job with it. So any hitters listening out there listen, I'm not saying that you're going to know what's coming in every situation, but your approach, you got to know, in terms of your approach, you got to know what pitch you hit the best and where on that plate with less than two strikes you hit the pitch the best. And you got to have an approach and stick with it. I'll tell the older guys, I said, we're not dating an approach. This is not like a weekend fling thing down for senior week. I'm talking about we got to put a ring on it, marry it, commit to it. If you say that, you hit a fastball on the outer third of the plate and that's where your natural swing plays with less than two strikes because where your swing is and where you stand in the box, for example, then the pitcher works for you, man, less than two strikes. That's where it's got to be, for example. So, understanding that, what the pitcher has. I mean, back in the day, too, it's like all that we were really concerned about was how hard does he throw for timing and what's his out pitch. And that still plays today. How hard does he throw? So I know I time up the fastest pitch he throws in that range. And what's his out pitch? So for two strikes, what's he going to throw? So again, we don't need the fancy game plans that they have in the big leagues, again, which are nice. It makes your job a little bit easier.
Sure.
But you can do that in high school and college. And you can just learn, again, you learn a lot by observing. And you can start, you bring your approach up there, but then in terms of understanding what that guy's doing, you can make adjustments throughout the game. And that's something I don't see a lot of, is kids being able to make adjustments in games. Certainly I wasn't like that either when I was younger, but someone taught me how to do it. And I think if you're going to be a good coach out there too, is take advantage of that, be able to teach those guys not only their approach that works for them, but also how to make adjustments based upon what they're watching, being on the rail, watching the game, talking with each other, talking with teammates about the game, and then being able to make those in-game adjustments because of your game planning plus what you see during the game.
Sure, and that leads me to a great question, which I've been mulling this around in my mind lately, truly, and it's one of those things that we need to learn how to teach the game better, like the game within the game, and to help players to understand what to look for, what to watch for, because like you mentioned, you watched the game a ton growing up. I did as well, and I also had the added bonus of having a dad that played in the big leagues, so he got to teach me a lot of those things myself. But those are things that I take for granted with a lot of kids now, because they see Instagram stories and they see the short snippets on Baseball Tonight and the MLB Network. But I think that we have done a disservice by not being able to teach the game within the game, or at least making that a priority. And I think especially the younger they are, if it's like chess, the more you know about chess, the more you're going to love it and understand it and want to play it. And I think baseball in a sense is very similar to that. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. There's not enough backyard baseball with football, stickball, whatever you want to call it, or unorganized, organized baseball. And you could argue in a lot of other sports too. Listen, I mean, in the neighborhood that we live in, we have an 11-year-old son, and he's not out there playing in a neighborhood like I did. So we're not we're not any different than a lot of other people. He's like you. He's around the big leagues a ton, and he's seen a ton. He's 11, so he's he doesn't even know what he knows right now, and that's absolutely fine. But for example, actually this afternoon, I'm taking him to a practice for a team that he hasn't played on before, but it's a really cool organization called the Anderson Monarchs in Philadelphia. And you might have heard that name. People are listening. Monet Davis. They played in the Little League World Series a couple of years ago, but she came from the Monarchs, and it's a great organization. And Steve Bandora there. But my point is that he's going down. They're just going to have a practice now since COVID shut down. He hasn't done any sports since March, and I've been trying to figure out safely where we could get him still into that organized, unorganized setting. And I'm just excited for him to go down and just strap on the cleats again and get out there, toss around, get some ground balls, and kind of get back into it a little bit today. Mm-hmm. But not enough kids are just playing, by themselves, organized. And that's where I feel, and I still do, that's where we learned how to actually play the game, and deal with failure. Dude, my buddy would strike me out 10 times a day in wiffle ball, but I also got him like 6 or 7 times, but it wasn't like I was coming home with my head down, like, just floored because I struck out 10 times. No, like it was trash talking, but you did it every day. You learned playing pickle how to run the bases. You learned in flag football, for instance, like, are you fast or is that other guy faster than you when someone's chasing you down? There's a lot of adversity through that, just a lot of different kind of situations that come up that you learn playing on the playground, in this case, baseball. You learned throwing to the right base. You learned how to, like, hey, if you turn third base, we didn't have base coaches, right? You turn around third base and got ball to the outfield. If you got hosed at home plate, that you learned from that. You learned either you're slow or that guy's got a good arm or something else, right? But you learned it, and you were able to fail and you're able to go, but you played so many innings. There's guys that I'm fortunate enough to walk alongside in the big leagues that you have to teach them the game at the big leagues that you sit and scratch your head that 10, 15 years ago that you already knew in high school, like stuff about the game. And that could be a whole different discussion in terms of how that happened. But, so as a coach, we can't assume that they know anything about the game. So out of respect for them and their career, I think that's a big thing, because they're not playing a lot on their own, and they're not playing that organized, unorganized stuff and out with their buddies and playing a lot and learning the game on their own, that we have to assume that they don't even know the rules. So we have to cover all the bases as coaches. And it might be frustrating, or we might get some eye rolls. But again, if you truly care about your players and having to play a really good team-oriented game, that's where we need to be. We need to assume that they don't know anything about it so we don't miss any steps. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. I kind of went off there, but those are some things that come to mind initially in terms of we got to get more kids, and myself included, with my son, get them into situations where there's no coaching and let them kind of figure things out. Because there's players in the field that know what they're doing. Like my son at 11, he knows enough about the game, but he also, he also has a lot to learn in terms of he's way behind on innings played, way behind on innings played. And I'm not talking showcase. We don't do travel ball, and I'm not saying travel ball is bad. So please, I don't need any messages on travel balls. Bad. There's some bad things about travel ball, but we're not here to talk about that. But I'm saying that he's behind on innings played, where is even at my age playing hockey, at his age rather playing hockey for me, I was still playing a lot of wiffle ball, a lot of stick ball, a lot of tennis ball, aluminum bat back in the day in the backyard. So I was playing a ton of baseball, but it wasn't with a uniform, so to speak, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And I think, I got the opportunity to coach at a high school under a guy that was recently inducted into the Oklahoma Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame. And one of the first things that he said to us in our first meeting was assume they know nothing, out of respect for them. Don't assume that they're idiots, but just assume that you need to break it down for everyone as if they don't know it, because a lot of them may, and then a lot of, there may be several that have never heard that thing before. And so out of respect for the entire group to be able to do that. But let's go ahead, and we're going to go ahead and go to a lightning section. And I love these questions just because they're quick hitters and they get the guests and myself to know you a little bit better. But what's the biggest lesson that you learned as a young coach?
Ask a better question and listen.
There it is. Mic drop. End of the show.
You said
That's
lightning
good.
round. So, when Joe says that on our podcast, I got to get it in and get it out because he yells at me.
Oh, that's good. Okay. What's a drill that your players love that we can steal from you?
I'm not a huge guy on one-size-fit-all drills.
Sure.
But one, to answer the question, and I think it's probably one of the most, I guess, closest to universal as possible is the 7-ball drill, which is you lay 7 balls in the front of the plate, 1 being in the inside corner, 7 being the outside corner, and 4 will be like middle cut. And throw them BP or chair BP and have them swing at everything as a hit and run. So they're not taking any balls. And so you have them swing at everything, and when they make contact, they got to tell you over which baseball on the ground there, 1 through 7, inside corner to outside corner, over which ball did they make contact with. So if you threw it down the middle and they swung and hit it and they say 4, then they're right on. But you as a coach also could tell them if they're 1 or 2 off, or sometimes they could be 3 or 4 off because they just don't know the plate that well or their strike zone that well. And at the end of that, throw them 10, 15, 20 by doing that. And then you ask them, over what 4 baseballs do you think your swing plays the most natural, where you drive the ball without even thinking about it? And then let them pick out whether it's 3 through 6 or 4 through 7 or 1 through 4, wherever they're standing on the plate. And then you take the other 3 balls away, and then you throw them another 10 to 20 more, and they're only allowed to hit inside that tunnel. And it goes back to, just because it's a strike doesn't mean you have to swing at it. That plays off of that. So for me, a 7-ball drill is really good at having them understand not only their strike zone, but the game strike zone, understand their swing, what they can and can't get to. It allows them to formulate, going back to that game plan, a better game plan with less than 2 strikes going into it, knowing that pitcher has to throw it in that tunnel. And the best hitters you see on TV, that's all they do. A lot of guys in the big leagues just sit middle now because a lot of pitchers, they don't hit their spots as well as they used to. So home runs are up because you see those heat maps that are right down the middle. So everybody builds their own tunnel, and you're trying to teach them to master their strengths, not the pitchers.
Oh, really good. I love that. This one is kind of a complex question, and take as much time as you need. I maybe you can help me to ask a better question. You talk about asking better questions to get better answers. But what is something that you want your players to do that you think is important, but it may go unnoticed by most people?
So, you know me, I love working in the shadows, behind the scenes, and a big part of that, and this goes back to the life thing is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I want you to be very detail oriented in everything that you do because it's your career. And if it's important to you, you're going to have a purpose for everything that you do, and you're going to understand why you do everything that you do. And the details do matter, right? Those little things, they turn into big things. So if I can trust you as a player with the little things, putting the ball on the tee right, for example, then I can trust you with building out your tunnel. And if you can do that in BP, then I can trust you with the bigger things of hitting the inside of the baseball in your tunnel to center field during the game, for example. So I love guys that can regurgitate back to me exactly why they do what they do. And they have a purpose to every single thing that they do, what they put into their bodies, how much sleep they get, what they write in their hitting journals, to their off the field relationships, who they let into their inner circle or not. And it goes on and on and on, but it's really helping them understand from an early age on is how you do anything is how you do everything. And the details do matter in the game of baseball and in the game of life.
I love that. Great answer. And then finally, I'm going to plug both of your books. Good Batting came out a little while ago, and then you've got another one called Finding Clarity. And I want to encourage our listeners to go check those out on Amazon or on your website. But besides those, if you could buy one book, or you could help our guests to experience one resource, or you could really just give them one piece of advice that you know is going to make them better, what would that be?
That's a tough question for me as the guy that individualizes everything.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'll give you this. For me, outside of the Bible, is in terms of a leadership book. For me, The Inner Game of Golf. You may have otherwise known it, Inner Game of Tennis. You may have heard it. Tim Gallwey's written both. Mm-hmm. But the Inner Game of Golf, to me, really helps with understanding how to lead, teach, mentor, and listen, because it really walks everybody who reads it through kind of, again, what's your purpose behind doing what you do? And really putting others first and serve others and understanding how to listen and how to ask that good question. And really, that book, it'll help you navigate the golf course, the tennis court, obviously the baseball field, mm-hmm. as a player or a coach. But in this case, I always recommend that book. And in fact, I gifted it out to another coach this summer. Try to find, I think it's on Amazon still. It's been out for a while, but it's a short book. It's a thin book. But it's impactful to me. So that's what I would encourage people, if they have not read it, to go check it out and pick up the tennis one or the golf one by Tim Gallwey.
Fantastic. It's probably the Inner Game of Tennis is probably the one book that I tell all players to read. And it's one that I didn't even read until, I'm an avid reader and I love to, but I didn't read it until last year, and I wish that I had done it a whole lot earlier. So fantastic resource, fantastic books, and Gallwey does an awesome job of breaking that stuff down. And it's like I think 30 years old. I mean, it's a pretty old book.
Yeah, and that's when you know it's good.
True. Because
the principles that are in that book, they last a lifetime. And I think just the other thing, just kind of expand on that real quick, is in anything that we do, it's just another reminder. So we don't need to write a book, right? But again, going back to that 5 minutes is how you going to, what legacy are you going to leave as a coach? We talked about weddings, but what is something that you're going to be able to plant that seed or shine that light into somebody that they're going to remember or take with them the rest of their lives? And the hard part as a coach or a mentor or a teacher or a leader is we don't always know what sticks with people, right? It's so tough sometimes where you think that you landed the plane with somebody and you get crickets, especially if you're a high school coach or a college guy or, somebody younger. You're like, man, I thought I just landed that plane and I got no response. But if we're not doing it for the immediate response, we're doing it for the playing the long game. We're doing this for life. And so, a book like Tim's or any of those types of people or books, or just, again, those 5 minutes. I'll drop Jeff Bannister's name real quick just as an example. There's so many people who have just taken 5 minutes to pour into me and change my life. But Jeff Bannister used to be the Rangers manager a couple years ago, and longtime Pittsburgh Pirate. He's a dear friend and mentor of mine. And I remember in 2011 or 10, almost 10 years ago, he's bench coach for the Pirates. They're here in Philly. We're on the field before the game for BP, and Benny comes over to me, and he was a field coordinator one year I was playing, so I had known he had the responsibility of releasing me one year, so he had that fun job. But he told me, he stuck his finger in my chest and he goes, Willie, because I was in between, like, hey, can I do this consulting thing? Can I jump from the lessons to do this pro consulting thing when no one was really doing it the way I wanted to do it back then? And he goes, big leaguers need you. You can do this, and you're the right guy for it. And I've told him multiple times how much I'm thankful for it. And, he's awesome. He always brushes it aside, but that's the power. He took 5 minutes out of batting practice, stick his finger in my chest 10 years ago, saying I can do what I'm doing today. That's what I'm talking about. That now he's changed my life. He gave me confidence to go do what I'm doing today. Therefore, I can help somebody new today with my 5 minutes, because he took that 5 minutes, and it goes on and on and on. So people are still kind of wondering, like, man, I don't have 5 minutes. I want to tell you that he's one of many, but that's one example of something. I'm doing this today because I had doubts. And after that day, when he lifted me up in that 5 minutes, here I'm doing this, and here we are today on this podcast. So you can touch a person's life and change their life. But if you're intentional about it and you care about them, man, the sky's the limit.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.